excited to be sharing the diverse perspectives of our young professionals, ranging from people who are working at space agencies to academic backgrounds to working in industry. We feel like it's going to be a really amazing opportunity to connect and learn from these amazing folks. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Chimera Andres. She is at the European Space Agency working in Earth observation, space technology, and STEM education didactics. So Chimera, do you want to talk a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Miriam. Hi, everybody. My name is Shamira. And if you can't pronounce my name, it's essentially like Shakira, but with an M, so Shamira. And also, I am currently living in the Netherlands, and I'm working as a young graduate trainee for the European Space Agency. But a little bit about myself, I finished my undergraduate degree from McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And that was in the integrated sciences. So it's a bunch of sciences essentially combined together. It's very much group-based, inquiry-based. So that's where I kind of learned a little bit more about my interest in space and how I wanted to go through. But I really specialized afterwards in physics and geology. So then for my master's, I really wanted to combine the two. So I did a degree on planetary sciences and geophysics at the University of Western Ontario. Shout out to the Institute of Planetary and Space Exploration. And then now I'm here currently in the Netherlands and I'm enjoying my time working in industry for the first time. It's currently my 4th month just working as a young graduate trainee and it's been lovely so far and I'm learning a lot and I'm enjoying my time here. I'm working in the education directorate, which means there's a lot of outreach, there's a lot of planning, a lot of ISS in-flight calls, organization kind of things. And yeah, a lot of training for the public especially. And there's a lot of emphasis on the difference between outreach and education. So I'm really learning a lot and I'm really loving it. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and my background.
Thank you so much, Shamira. That's really amazing. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into that in our Q&A session, but thank you for sharing that. Next up, we have Zedrana, who is the national point of contact for Canada at the Space Generation Advisory Council. Zed, take it away.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks a lot, Miriam. So like Miriam said, I'm one of the national point of contacts for Canada alongside Miriam. And I also wear a couple of different hats. I work at the Canadian Space Agency. In previous years, I've also worked at the European Space Agency in Germany, at the European Space Operations Center, developing machine learning applications for space operations. And I also got the chance to work at the European Space Research and Technology Center, where Chimera is, in the Netherlands, primarily in lunar exploration and space resources. And now this is sort of the year where I'm preparing undergoing the daunting process of graduate school applications. So that's certainly something to look forward to. One of the other exciting factors that everyone here in this panel, I've in some shape or form worked with in the past or presently working with, collaborating across different exciting projects. So that's certainly something exciting to be with friends and having a conversation. In terms of a couple of things that I think in recent years, especially when thinking about space opportunities and the things that I'm doing or that I look forward to doing, one of the elements that I'm increasingly starting to talk about is access to opportunities. So I personally have come with a background of challenges in terms of health and especially neurological disorders, so brain diseases and whatnot. So it has kind of pivoted me on a sort of a track in reframing the things that I'm doing and my ambitions, but at the same time helps me recontextualize a bit of, give me some perspectives in terms of how I'm getting to where I need to go and where I am today. So yeah, these are just a couple of elements that I'm hoping to elaborate and talk about.
Thank you, Zed, and especially thank you for putting the highlight on those different aspects of the journey that we need to be talking about as we think about our professional careers. Next up, we have Mary Grace Kelney, who is an aerospace systems engineer at Loft Orbital Solutions. Mary Grace?
Hi all, I'm Mary Grace. I go by MG for short. And as Miriam said, I am an aerospace systems engineer at Loft Orbital Solutions, which is a space startup in San Francisco, California. So I am from Canada, grew up in Ontario, and went to school at McGill University, where I studied physics and computer science. And then trying to get more into the space industry after my first degree, I attended Concordia University, also in Montreal, for a couple years of aerospace engineering courses. And I had a brief stint at the Canadian Space Agency as an intern there prior to moving down south and joining Loft Orbital just this past year in the middle of the pandemic. So yeah, that's been an interesting experience. Happy to talk about today.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary Grace. So with that, we'll get into some of the questions that we have for the panelists. And then towards the end of the session, we're also going to welcome audience questions. So folks, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I want to start with something fun. When we think about space, it's always very exciting. And, you know, it sort of drives a lot of passion and interest. So I wanted to get perspectives from all of you on what got you interested in the space sector to begin with. And maybe Zed, you can weigh in first.
Yeah, I think one of my fondest memory was when I was in primary school. I went to the planetarium and I distinctly remember this presentation. It was about the sun. And I remember walking out of that presentation and it kind of blew my mind just thinking about how the sun is just any regular sort of stars. And there are so many millions and billions of stars across the Milky Way, our galaxy, and that kind of pivoted me in a direction where I was really, it got me fascinated. Just that fact that there is something more to the things that we're surrounded with and the things we see, hear, and touch and can perceive. So that was definitely one of those moments that catapulted me to start thinking forward in terms of being very curious about what else is out there, what else can I probe and touch and experiment with. And it's been definitely something that I found over the years has been sort of like a journey, finding and having different footprints across at this point, various countries and continents, just trying to do that, undergoing that process of discovery and learning. And the more you kind of go deep into it, the more questions you see, and over time you end up experimenting with different stuff. And I think space in a nutshell really encapsulates that idea of experimenting and trying something new and with a lot of unknowns and uncertainties. So that's something that I've found to be quite interesting over the years.
Yeah, thank you, Zed. That's so interesting. How about yourself, Shamira?
For me, I think the first spark of space, I think came in university, but ever since I was 5 years old, I've been telling everyone, my whole family, that I wanted to be an astronaut since when I grew up. So I think though my first real experience in actually getting into the industry and paving my path, sort of, everyone has a different path. So for me, because I went to McMaster University, it's very much like a science engineering basic school. So we didn't have a space department or anything like that. So I knew my interests were still there, but my very first university project was to plan a mission to Mars. And so just being thrown in from high school and working with a group of 5 people, and we had to plan and organize like calculations for planetary, like propulsion and what type of gas are we going to use and fuel for where are we going on Mars, where are we landing, how are we landing, what are we going to do there when we find like soil or a sample or anything like that, biological experiments and things like that. So even I think the psychology of a crewed mission versus an uncrewed mission. So it was a very overwhelming project, but I think for me, it was kind of a wake-up call that it was like a reminder of my like deep kind of ambition of being an astronaut. And so from then on, that my role in that project was I was immediately drawn to kind of the landing site analysis. And so I wanted to plan like where we're going to land, what are the aspects geologically, mapping wise, remote sensing data sets that we're going to use. But I think for me that it was more the practical sense and the teamwork, because space is a very interdisciplinary subject as well. So it's not just for engineers, it's not just for scientists, it's also for journalists, it's also for artists, it's also for a lot of different career paths. And so I really appreciated that. And I learned that like through my undergrad program and kind of fostered that throughout. And I still try to find those like little and integrating those little topics where I can. So I think, yeah, for me, that was just how I got inspired and then continued my love for space.
I love it. Yeah, especially the bit with the Mars mission and figuring out landing sites. Like you got straight into it. That's so cool. How about yourself, Mary Grace?
Yeah, so I think kind of similar to Shamira, I'd always been interested in space. Like I definitely thought in terms of introspection, right? When you're trying to find out who you are as a person and why we're on Earth and why we do things the way we do, we often turn our look outwards and look at the universe and our place in it. So in that sense, I'd always been really interested in space and studying the universe and why things work the way that they do. I think that's what got me into physics initially. But then while I was at McGill, I happened to take a trip down to Houston, Texas, and got to visit the Johnson Space Center. And that really solidified things for me. I decided at that point that the space industry was where I wanted to be and what I wanted to be a part of. So specifically, I think Mission Control Center, getting to see the flight directors speaking with the astronauts on ISS or commanding all of the robots and just actually getting to see what those jobs looked like was really exciting for me. And I could really picture myself in that sort of role. So that was what, yeah, really every decision after that was to find my way to the space industry. So it just seemed like the coolest place to be.
Amazing. And I especially like how you talked about seeing people in that role helping to inspire the decision and direction that you took further on in your career. And that's also part of the reason we're hosting this panel today, is to give you those perspectives so you can learn from people working in the space sector, and hopefully that inspires your decisions moving forward as well. So with that, Chimera, maybe we'll start with you. You talked about working at ESA right now as a young graduate trainee. Could you tell us a little bit more about this program and maybe how other interested youth in Canada could apply?
Yeah, for sure. So people often think that because it's called the European Space Agency, that it's only for Europeans. But actually Canada and the Canadian Space Agency and the European Space Agency have this joint agreement where Canada acts as an associate member state. So we contribute a little bit to the European Space Agency and their activities. So that's why we actually can participate in some of their activities as well. The Young Graduate Trainee is just an example, and that is a program that's actually being launched in February this year again. Usually it's in December. So if you are a master's student or a recent master's student graduate, you're able to apply for that traineeship. And also if you're not, there's also some internships, which probably Zaid can talk more about. And yeah, so essentially the YGT, as we call it, is a one-year contract, and you're treated as a staff member of the European Space Agency, and you apply for a position, and I think statistically, I'm not sure how many people usually apply, but I think what they do is they equally take kind of proportionally from each member state. The hiring process, I'm not really sure if that's actually accurate, but yeah, so that's what I've heard. But there's a lot of different positions depending on the directorate. You can be in human and robotics and exploration, or policy and law. So personally, the YGTs that I've met, some interesting ones that I can point out are definitely space law, YGT, a business YGT in space, business, also, yeah, and obviously a few of lunar exploration, Martian exploration, ExoMars. But yeah, it's a really cool, I think, opportunity, and I think everyone should definitely try to apply for it. And if you're still an undergraduate student, you can still take advantage of the opportunities, because the ESA education, we offer a lot of workshops throughout the year, as well as, I think, teacher training. So if you're a teacher from Canada or a student from Canada, you can, like elementary school or high school, you can participate in the activities. So if you need any resources, I can also point you out to the websites and put the link on the YouTube, the Zoom link, or whichever I can share. Just let me know.
That would be amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing all those different opportunities. So folks, I mean, look at the ESA website, keep an eye out, and we'll also be sharing some opportunities from that side. I especially liked how you mentioned YGTs and business and space law. It's just highlighting the different aspects of space and the different ways you can get involved in the sector. So Zed, maybe we'll go to you now. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about how you got involved in space starting at the university level. You worked on some CubeSat projects that are really interesting. So how did you sort of leverage that experience to continue working in the space domain?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, when I started at Concordia University back in 2016, that was also right around the time where I had just gained my proficiency in relearning and speaking English and French again. There was a time where I completely had difficulties in loss of motors and speech faculties and whatnot. So coming right, starting university was in itself pretty daunting, but also knowing that I was very excited and ambitious about being part of space made me really question, how do I approach it? And how do I really sort of access this field? It felt that you had to have rigorous academic training, or that you might need to have some sort of affiliation with a research center or a dedicated technology project. And that was something that I thought was quite difficult. And just in generally, it's you don't see that around. You can Google things and it's not right away immediate. But what was immediate right away was that there was a dedicated, there is still a dedicated astronautical engineering club at Concordia University, Space Concordia. It's an incredible group of like-minded students that are building planetary rovers, CubeSats, and sound rockets, and also more recently some space health and space medicine related projects. And right away, one of the things that I did was I joined the spacecraft division within the student club. And we were participating in the Canadian Satellite Design Challenge, which is essentially a 2-year project to build, design, build a satellite, and you have an active outreach component. And sort of right at the end of, during the last few months of the challenge, I branched off from my team to work on the proposal of this new initiative that the Canadian Space Agency had announced, that they would select teams across Canada to essentially design, build, and have your satellite fly in space and to actually operate it. And that was a very exciting opportunity. And at the time, the support sort of fluctuated between university and really being a student-led society, you really had to lean a lot on other students and pretty much yourselves. And I found myself heavily invested for almost a year, sort of putting a hat of an architect and putting pieces together for developing this proposal that eventually came to be known as Space Concordia's Orbital Dust Imaging Nanosatellite, or SCODIN for short. And that was a labor of an extensive, a lot of effort, bringing scientists together in terms of what the mission would look like and what we could be doing with a small satellite, but also key project partners and industry members and other affiliated partners that could address different components of the project. And eventually, in May 2018, we were announced, Concordia University was announced by astronaut Jenny Seide as one of the 15 teams in Canada that were selected for this project. So that whole experience was quite interesting. It catapulted me also to learn that space is very much dependent on various interactions. And I found that during the process of developing and putting together that proposal, it was quite frankly a lonely process. And the thing that I look most forward to, and the best part about that proposal, was the hope and optimism of working with an incredibly talented group of people and friends and sharing that experience. I think that was, that surmounted every other challenges and barriers and, knocking a lot of doors. So eventually had the chance to go through that and be part of it. It is still ongoing. The CubeSat is planned to be launched next year, and I know that that is how I've met MG, and I'm sure she'll share her experience. But that was definitely one of the highlights is meeting the people, and they all add something new to it, and you kind of build off that synergy, and you learn through the perspectives of other person and how they're leading and how they're carrying the project forward. And incrementally it gets only better and better. And now, right today, there's a group of an amazing, talented undergraduate students that are tackling this complex engineering and project management challenge, essentially. So eventually that was something, just that process of architecting a proposal and putting all that effort was one of the reasons why that led me to being hired at the Canadian Space Agency. Although funnily enough, that was not exactly why I was initially hired. I remember like prior to joining spacecraft with one of my close friends, we built essentially a ground station in sort of in the backyard of a friend's house. And there were just six of us. And we essentially prototyped this ground station to track amateur and educational satellites. And I did a small research project around that. And I ended up submitting for a grant opportunity that is offered by the Canadian Space Agency for students to present their research and findings and projects that they've worked on at big international conferences like the International Astronautical Congress, the IEC. And that, as part of that grant, you also had the opportunity to be potentially hired by the CSA for an internship. And that's how I got my first internship at the agency, which timed right along sometimes when the Canadian CubeSat project was announced, the winning teams. And so I was also integrated as part of the team that was overseeing and launching the initiative nationwide. So once again, I think the key lessons across all of this was that prototyping and doing things that felt very familiar within my environment with a group of friends and at our backyard of at a cottage place of a friend, and then seeing how these elements combined together led to something bigger. And eventually I ended up working 9 months as an intern at CSA before getting an opportunity to go to Germany and work at the European Space Operations Center. And that's where I really worked primarily on Integral. It's a space observatory. And I was working across developing these machine learning applications and models to study radio frequency interference events. So that was a very technical, but also very interesting challenge to take on. It also involved a lot of creativity. You had to find different ways to interact with different teams, the flight dynamics team, but also learn some of the nitty gritty of computational sciences and whatnot. And eventually that leg of my journey led me to the Netherlands, where I totally changed gears and worked on space resources. So in situ resource utilization, might be something you might have heard of, or space mining, more colloquially referred to as. And that was a very different tone. That experience involved a lot of technical science, but also strategy and policy analysis. And that was interesting. I got the opportunity to be part of these early stage space missions that are looking to send some robotic explorers to scout and do some prospecting to better understand and to improve our knowledge of the moon and its the environment, and in preparation of future crewed missions with the Artemis program. So all of that journey culminated into a lot of interaction with so many people, but also great mentors along the way. And they were critical in my growth. They showed me different perspective, but they also engaged with me in taking risk. And I would even say that 2019, that was the year when I pivoted from the CSA to ESA. It was the year where my health challenges started fluctuating and resurfaced. So I had to be also candid in some of the limitations and difficulties that I was seeing with my work. And that process of empathizing with my supervisors and communicating with them really improved my experience, and it in fact probably enhanced my perspective of how I viewed my own contributions within the team. Certainly things like self-esteem and communicating about these, which I'm only sort of recently started doing that and in publicly as well. And I think coming back now and wrapping up this sort of process of all these experiences and trying to develop a proposal for graduate school application is now pulling all sorts of memories and experiences of interacting with different people, with different projects, and also a lot of interpersonal dynamics and soft skills that I've had to tap into over the years, from building a CubeSat mission from scratch. Like I said, sort of like wearing a hat of an architect. It really made me realize how much the people element is ingrained in how we view the space, and even access to space opportunity is so intimately tied with the people that you meet and that you know. Many would tell you that the space community is a village, and I think that is something that over the years I've gotten a better appreciation of it. But the sort of the double-edged sword, it's a double-edged sword, because on the other hand, it is still challenging when you think in terms of access to opportunities, because once you're in, so to speak, you have a different narrative, and you have much more broader access to groups of people that know different projects and opportunities and individuals that they can connect you to. So coming for anyone that might be starting, or as I started in 2016, I had a myopic view of what access to space would look like. Like I said, I thought it would involve a strenuous academic background or some stringent research affiliation. And it turns out there's a lot of different pathways, and experimenting and really going across an experiential learning platform was something that I found personally to be very successful. And I think that's pretty much the key to my, at least my personal growth navigating the space sector, was prototyping my experiences and not being afraid of trying to create what I would initially thought could be an opportunity that might open the door for me. And I think that's something that sticks with me, is trying to build something if you don't see it existing.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Zed, for walking us through that and sharing all your experiences. It certainly provides a different lens on the opportunities in the sector and the challenges along the way. So I want to shift gears a little bit and get perspective from the industry side. So Mary Grace, you're at Loft Orbital today in the US. Maybe you could tell us a bit about how you found that opportunity, and if you had any advice for Canadian youth that are looking to network and find roles that are open to international folks in the US space sector.
Yes, certainly. So my path has been a little bit different to get to where I am, and a little bit unexpected. I'd say generally for myself, like if I look at my experience from Johnson Space Center to CSA, it was all very planned, very calculated. I basically went back to school and I said, okay, I can't work at NASA, I'm not an American, but I can work at the CSA. And I reversed engineered it. I said, what do the CSA engineers look like? Where did they start? How do you get, and I boiled it down to, okay, I can maybe get an internship. And so that was, break that down again. Who are the interns at the Canadian Space Agency? Well, a lot of them are in co-op programs in engineering. And so I kind of made all of my decisions very planned with that end goal of getting to the CSA. And you can definitely follow that path. There are, like I'd say for everybody out there, if you can find people in industry or specific positions that you're interested in, it is possible to break those down and kind of follow that path and get there really clear cut. But my path to where I am now in San Francisco did not follow this like very planned and calculated pathway at all. This was very unexpected for me, and I dropped out of school in my program at Concordia to pursue this opportunity. It was that unexpected. I wasn't looking for it. But how that came about was actually through a network that I'd built attending different space conferences and meeting people in industry. So while I was at Concordia and I knew I wanted to work in the space industry, I took every opportunity to attend local conferences like the Montreal Space Symposium. Was also really fortunate to go down to the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs as a delegate for a Space Generation Advisory Council event that was there. And so my my experience there as a total noob in the space industry. I really knew nothing and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So I am a people person. So the one thing I did is I just introduced myself to people that were there, tried to make friends, hear about what they were doing. And I was really fortunate to make some great contacts in the industry and people that really wanted to advocate for me as a student as well. I think one of the real benefits of being a student is that everybody wants to help you. If we're in the industry, we've been there, we know the struggle, and we know that passion that you have to get there. So I was really fortunate to find a couple champions that were already in the industry who were willing to make introductions and kind of speak on my behalf about opportunities. So in that case, it was actually through a contact that they knew someone at Loft. Loft was hiring, they were interested and willing to take international or foreign nationals for the role. And so it's through that recommendation, really the network that brought me there. But for students like myself that are in Canada thinking, oh, maybe I'd like to try the space industry in the US, I definitely recommend it. I'll say there's plenty of opportunities north of the border too, so don't feel like you have to be going to a different country to get the experience that you want. There are opportunities there. But if you are interested, I'd say start making connections, start talking to people. I certainly didn't know companies like Loft existed that could hire people from Canada. And that was really through just experience of getting to talk to people and hear from them. So they exist. You have to dig a little bit, but start building that network. And that's what I would say is the best path.
Yeah, thank you, MG. I love the focus on the power of networking, you know, and talking to people and putting yourself out there because you never know what opportunities exist. So love that. Thanks. So Shamira, back to you. You wear so many hats. You also serve as the president for SEDS-Canada. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about SEDS and some of the initiatives that the organization has underway to promote opportunities for Canadian youth interested in space.
Of course, yeah. Speaking of network, so SEDS-Canada is actually, this is a really great segue because we have our largest student-run conference open to all. I think usually it's open to Canadian students because it's in person physically, but this year we're hoping to host it virtually. Well, not hoping, we're planning to host it virtually. It's at the end of February. And so, yeah, so these are kind of one of the student conferences, space conferences to help you build your network. And we're bringing space to you, essentially. So that's kind of SEDS-Canada's goal, is to also provide these professional development opportunities, not only for just outreach, but also just like actual developing your skills as a student, and as you can at building those skills towards industry. So we have also a lot of projects open to students and a lot of open events, not just the conference. So a few of our projects examples are the Canadian Stratospheric Balloon Challenge, the Canadian Reduced Gravity Challenge on a parabolic flight. And we partner with the Canadian Space Agency as well as Natural Resources Canada for these projects. So we're not alone. And as you can see, you will start to notice that space in Canada is also such a small place. So once you know someone, it kind of is like a domino effect, and you can kind of just connect with another. And I think that's what we're really lucky to have a space community that's kind of that tight knit. And so as students, we're trying to build this network of students so we can actually provide more resources, especially during this time, more online resources so students can access. If you are interested in going to grad school or any type of school that has some space theme or affiliation, we're trying to reach out and create more access to that. But yeah, so since we're a national nonprofit organization, we also have a lot of coverage in the West Coast, and also we're trying to get the East Coast to be more accessible to everybody. Currently, a lot of our participants and also our staff and board of directors are more in central southern Ontario and just Ontario in general, but we're hoping to expand that a little bit more. But yeah, SEDS-Canada is essentially an open community for all students and young professionals that are interested in space, or even if you just want to attend an event or a hackathon, we have all of those as well. So I'd encourage you to check out our website also, and also follow us on social media. You'll find out a lot of our events, mostly for free. So we're just really trying to get more visibility, especially for students, because we really want to advocate that these opportunities exist. So it would be, yeah, it's just a really nice community also that we're building. And I think we also are building a community of advisors for SEDS-Canada. So we're not just students working on our own. It's also some volunteer superstar advisors that we have, that we're lucky to have. I think currently we have 17 all across Canada, and we try to make it a diverse and inclusive community. So it's open to everybody and anyone interested in space. That's all you need to be, basically, to have.
Yeah, thank you, Shamira. And I can personally vouch for SEDS-Canada. I've worked with them for a while. They're doing some amazing stuff for Canadian youth interested in space. So please check out their website and start getting involved in some exciting projects. Now, Zed, you are also a national point of contact at the Space Generation Advisory Council. What are some of the opportunities available to Canadians through this organization?
Yeah, I love this train of sort of the highlights of power of networking, and again, the emphasis on who you know and interacting with people, which tends to be an enabling opportunity. And SGAC is exactly, it's that. It's a non-governmental organization that aims to represent young professionals and students to the UN, industry, and academia. And MG mentioned earlier that she had the opportunity to be a delegate to attend the Space Generation Fusion Forum and also the associated event at the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs. So that events are one of the flagship hallmarks of SGAC. There are events that are international scale, but also local, and some are regional. To give you a bit of a highlight, so some of the big events that SGAC primarily develops includes the Space Generation Congress. Now, that one is intimately tied with the International Astronautical Congress, the IAC. And it's a traveling Congress, essentially. Wherever the IAC is held, the SGAC is held there as well. So this year, fall, depending on how things goes, if things are in person, it will be in Dubai. And SGC is one of the wonderful opportunity for you to be a delegate and have other students and young professionals from over 50 different countries to come together and blend your perspectives on a variety of topics. And you actually get to work in working groups on different topics that are not always purely technical. Actually, some of the best ones are usually at the intersection of science, business, policy. So that's one avenue. And the in terms of barrier of entry, one of the nice things about SGAC is that you only have to be a student or a young professional between the age of 18 and 35, and that's all. You know, anyone and everyone can be an SGAC member, and I would encourage you to go over our website, spacegeneration.org. But the key point is being a member is fairly an easy process to do, just complete a web form, but it's about your engagement and being active in the community. And that was highlighted by both Shamira and MG to talk to people and to actively reach out. And SGAC does provide these opportunities to enable communication between different groups. So we also have project groups, which range from cyberspace and cybersecurity to human rights and ethics, to space exploration and commercial space, and it really goes, really touches us across various different aspects and fields. So in a way, you can be wearing practically any hat coming from any domain. You do not have to be from science, engineering, mathematics, or any of those related fields. And one of the other interesting elements with SGAC are, like I mentioned, national or regional events. So chances are, depending on where you are located, SGAC has dedicated national point of contacts who are working more closely at the country level and trying to rally by making sure that they provide resources and opportunities and also create networking platforms and events to allow sort of the gathering of different students and young professionals to articulate and talk about different aspects that are more local to space activities and what is being coordinated specifically in their particular country. And that's where typically you will have sometimes workshops or SG-Canada, for example. That's an example of an event that has been hosted in the past. Regionally, you have some workshops that tend to bring various countries together. And these are another layer of opportunity to engage with different students and different affiliations from industry, NGOs to government space agencies and whatnot. And I should add that SGC also provides a variety of scholarship opportunities. So while, yes, there are a couple of conferences and key flagship events that SGC hosts, which vary across different countries, and the Fusion Forum is certainly one that is held in Colorado Springs consistently in conjunction with these Space Symposium. But that being said, there are scholarship opportunities for that, for the Space Generation Congress, as I mentioned, but also for those regional workshops that are hosted across Europe, North America, Central America, and the Caribbean regions, for instance. And that is certainly something that I would encourage everyone, if you have the chance, go to the website, spacegeneration.org, see if you can find your national point of contact with the Union countries. And again, what's been highlighted across this conversation is reach out and don't hesitate to experiment and see what vacancies and opportunities that are available. SGC has a ton of opportunity to be as a volunteer. So you can volunteer across events, but also join different initiatives that are being led by these project groups that I mentioned earlier. And these are another extra layer that provides you that ability to connect with different people and connect with different perspectives and specializations, which I think will certainly help broaden your perspectives, but also surprise you in which direction your own journey in space adventures might go in.
Amazing. Yeah. So folks, check out the SGAC website and then feel free to reach out to Zed or even myself. We both serve as national points of contact for Canada for SGAC, and we'd be happy to address any questions you have. Now, MG, you mentioned that you interned at the Canadian Space Agency prior to joining Loft Orbital. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that experience was like and how you would contrast working at a space agency versus working in industry.
Oh, great question. Yeah, I will give a little bit of background then on how I ended up at the Canadian Space Agency and what led there, because that was a big part of what I did when I was there. So as Zed introduced earlier, I was part of a project called SC Odin, Space Concordia's orbital dust imaging nanosatellite, which was a CubeSat project by a group of students at Concordia University. So the student-led project was supported by professors at the university and of course the Canadian Space Agency themselves who are funding the project, but it's entirely student-led. So it was up to us to manage everything, to get in touch with our suppliers, to make the actual designs, to figure out how are we going to operate a satellite on orbit and actually deliver what we want to the end customer in this case, which was scientists at the University of Montreal. And when I joined this project, when I joined Concordia University, I didn't even know what a CubeSat was. I didn't know anything about satellite engineering, any of the subsystems, how any of them worked. And fortunately, I'd had some student experience at clubs at McGill as more of like a project manager. So when I joined the team, I was able to apply my skills as a project manager there, but I was very reliant on all of the other amazing members of my team to teach me about satellite engineering while I was there. So trying to manage the team and learn what is an electrical subsystem, how do we define what work you need to do for that? And it was an amazing opportunity. I'd highly recommend to anybody, if you get to work on student projects, go do that, because what that led to for me was a direct line to the Canadian Space Agency. So as I was managing that team and learning about satellite engineering, we got to interact. We sent reports to the Canadian Space Agency. We got to give them presentations. And so that allowed me to get in touch with people at the Canadian Space Agency, get the opportunity and experience that I needed to be an eligible candidate, and then eventually get an opportunity to actually intern there, getting to use project management and learning more about systems engineering. So while I was there, I got to help on projects that gave back to my team actually at Concordia. So we worked on what was called a flat sat project, which is the idea that when your satellite is in orbit, it's a great practice to have an on-ground representation of what's in space, so that you can do any testing if something goes wrong. Basically have a version of the satellite that instead of assembled is laid out across a table, hence FlatSat. And so as a systems engineer working on that FlatSat project, I was really fortunate to be introduced to that whole systems engineering area from these engineers at the Canadian Space Agency who were so knowledgeable and willing to teach me, and just work with a fantastic team of junior engineers and other interns there to really develop my skills. Like, I think that was such an amazing part of the CSA's philosophy on their interns. They want it to be educational. There are things that you're doing to actually help the agency and their goals, of course, and their projects. I got to do some of that on the project management side more so, but it was very educational, and that's what really set me up for my job now as an aerospace systems engineer at Loft. And so the differences are quite different, especially I'd say though, being in a startup versus a government agency. At the startup, it's more reminiscent of my time on the student group, where you do wear different hats. You really help out wherever you can and get to see a lot more of what's going on in everybody's roles across your company. So that's been a very different experience for me, and also just getting to see kind of the commercial side of it. So I work as a systems engineer on the business development team. So most of my days are actually talking to potential customers, learning about their instruments and trying to fit that to our platforms. So it's a very different perspective on the space industry that's not, from the government side in terms of, the funding, and a different situation, but both equally exciting. Would highly recommend either opportunities in government and old space versus new space and startups. There's something to learn from all of those types of experiences.
Awesome. Thank you all. We're going to transition now to the audience Q&A portion of this webinar. So with that, I will start with a question for Chimera, because you recently mentioned that you graduated and transitioned to this new opportunity at ESA. Maybe you could address this question about the biggest challenge for you when you were making this transition from being a student to starting a career in space.
Yeah, so I feel like we're always going to be a student forever, regardless if you're not actually a student, but you're always learning. And so I really love that part of being a student and student life in general, was that endless community of learning in an academic institution. But I think after I graduated or finished my master's or undergrad, I transitioned into, technically it's not like a full-time job, but it is a career in space. It is like a position in a government agency. I think the thing that I find challenging the most is usually in undergrad and your master's, you're kind of like doing stuff on your own, on the go, learning things on the go. And I think, and you're always kind of on a deadline, and you're always in a rush. So I think I don't know, maybe it's just during this time because it's a pandemic, but I think it was hard for me to realize that I can just relax and calm down, because it's a very different environment from academia and industry, depending on where you work. But for me, I think as a student, I was always kind of high stress and always wanting to meet deadlines and do homework and do this assignment and have a test tomorrow and exam or anything like that. But as you start your career in space, you can I'm still kind of learning as I go, but as I'm learning as I go, I do realize that there's no need for me to speed up the process, or I think just appreciating the moment and the learning process of my experience right now at ESA is really, really nice. I don't have the need to always think ahead, but I do obviously in the job you were prepared, but I don't know if that's good advice. But yeah, the thing I find really challenging is just that the mindset is just switching my mindset. I always, before in September when I started the job, I thought I was still in a student environment, but I was in a government international space agency. And so I had to kind of calm down and say, okay, I have a lot of work to do, but I don't have that much work to do. It was kind of like just the mindset, I think, was the switch for me.
Yeah, makes sense because working versus being in school, there's like two different scenarios, and there's like an adjustment period that you alluded to. So this one I'm going to ask you, MG, because we talked a little bit about the difference between working at an agency versus working in industry, but maybe you could share what a typical day looks like in your job as an aerospace systems engineer for people who are interested potentially in pursuing this career path.
Certainly. So yes, I mean, my role as a systems engineer or working on systems engineering at the CSA is quite a bit different than my work now at Loft, primarily because now I sit on the business development team. So like I said, a typical day for me actually looks like fielding different emails or contacting different people in the industry to hear about potential opportunities to fly their instruments. So at Loft, for those that aren't familiar, we offer mission as a service. So we operate small satellites in low Earth orbit, and they're a platform that we can kind of use as a ride share. So you can select a whole bunch of different instruments, configure them all on a small satellite, larger than a CubeSat. So you can put these different instruments on them all together. They share the resources of a standard satellite bus. And we can do this really quickly and efficiently and basically with minor changes, without any changes to the instruments from our customers. And so my role as the systems engineer, as the first kind of technical person that any of our customers might interact with, is to learn all about their instruments. So I love it, getting to ask people about, these instruments that they're developing. They're always such fun conversations. But so getting to hear about what do their concept of operations look like. Currently, we're talking to a lot of people about technical demonstrations for science instruments for Earth observation or solar, stellar observation. So getting to hear what does success look like for them, trying to identify the key requirements that'll be driving the success of their mission, and then distilling that down to things that I can bring back to our engineering team and our models to see how will this fit on our satellite? Can we make this work? And especially in that ride sharing configuration, trying to figure out if I have 4 or 5 different instruments on the satellite, how can I make sure that their missions would all work? They have to complement each other and make sure that no one interferes with the others. So I'd say this is quite a different type of systems engineering role than what you might expect if you're looking up typical systems engineering. But certainly I still bring the classic mindset of sitting in between all the subsystems. I have to think of our mechanical structure, our power. Do we have the ADCS that's going to support this? Getting to kind of, stick my finger in a whole bunch of different areas in our company. And that's a lot of systems engineering in general. So that's conversations, some analysis, fun stuff.
Got it. Yeah, sounds pretty interesting. A mix of technical and business development skills being brought to the table. So we have an interesting question here that I'll direct to you, Zed. So the audience is asking, what are some common misconceptions that people have about the space industry?
Yeah, one of the big one I would have to say is that there is specific thing or a box that you kind of need to fit in, or that would have to be a specific career track that is laid down, and you would have to sort of model exactly that. And it is not in some ways, it is a successful way to achieve a certain kind of career, but I think it puts you on a sort of shaky ground where you are potentially inhibiting your own creative thoughts and processes and ideas. And from my own personal experience, initially when I saw that, when I was looking from my view and outward, and I didn't see myself being able to achieve any of those aspects that I found stringent, or being involved in some fancy research lab. And in fact, doing the opposite by looking at what kind of interests and thoughts that I have, and how do I shape these ideas into actual projects, what led me to universities, clubs, and student societies. And Space Concordia is such a giant bubble of creative people. They have such unique individual talent, but also ideas and they complement different skills. So I think if you approach it from a much more agnostic standpoint, you will have a better chance and be more receptive to hearing the other prospects that the space community offers. Notably, earlier, Shamira mentions how one of the interested YGTs that she encountered were in spaceflight business, and that's something that I didn't know about until a couple of years ago either. So I think that's really where you can start pivoting by taking a step back and understanding that whatever your local environment is, that try not to look exactly to a replica of what the industry pathway looks like, and instead think in terms of what can I do with what I'm interested in, and if that is a creative process in law or technical in business, then think perhaps how can I apply this within my community. And if you look at a sort of a local ecosystem and who are the people within my community, can I access a university student club, can I tap into a nonprofit, NGO, and that's where and with an agnostic sort of mindset, you start seeing that potentially everything touches various aspects of space. Human spaceflight, there's a lot of aspects that deals with human physiology and big data analytics. So it's really an infusion of different perspectives and different individuals. And I think by letting yourself in the first place to be open to that sort of mindset and allowing your character to free flow a bit and distill some sense of reassurance that you don't have to fit a particular mold. I think that brings some reassurance and also some clarity by looking at your local ground and seeing who's where and what are they actually doing. And as it's been emphasized earlier, the power of networking, that's going to really help as well in sort of emphasizing your communication channels. So I think that's definitely one of the key aspects that I would drive home.
Awesome. Yeah, we have another audience question that I want to squeeze in there before we move on to concluding remarks. So the audience question is, when applying to undergraduate internships, how do you set yourself apart from other people who want the position, especially when you don't have much experience? So I'll leave it open. I mean, MG, if you want to take that, Zed, Chimera.
Yeah, I can start, and feel free, Zed and Shamira, to add to this, please. I'd say if you do have some experiences, and I'd argue that even if you think maybe you don't have experience, not in the space industry, you probably have other club experience or other even just student projects, things that you've learned in your courses. I'd really encourage you to look at those in a different perspective, to kind of see how are those experiences something that you can use to translate into an internship role, and kind of try to analyze that. Like, were you a leader in your student group? Did you just take charge of a student project or something else? So look at those experiences, but also just show your enthusiasm. I think being able to show that you're passionate and you're hardworking, those, no matter your experiences, are really valuable qualities that any space agency would definitely be looking for. They want to see that the people that they'll hire want to be there and are going to work hard and learn.
Indeed, it's so important to convey that passion for the role as well, as you mentioned, MG. So with that, we're at the end of our webinar. I just want to get some final thoughts from our panelists before we conclude. So what is your advice then for students or young professionals from Canada looking to enter the space sector? I guess we have been talking about it throughout the session, but if you had to summarize it, what are some of the key points you'd like to highlight? And we can start with Zed.
I would definitely say it's the power of speaking to people and having really that agnostic mindset. You want to get as much and as many perspectives as possible, as highlighted by MG, student clubs, and even the experiences that you think you don't have. You do have something. You are an individual, and that in itself is inherently something that is interesting. So those attributes that you'd like to amplify, or those that you would like to explore and grow new skills, then I would certainly say that do not, be open and receptive to reaching out and appreciating what you have, and really tapping into that sort of creative process of seeing, can you maybe potentially join a student club or a project within your community, a grassroots kind of program and building from that. If you don't see a particular door that fits the narrative, then make your own narrative. And that's certainly something that I've found myself doing. So I would encourage that for sure.
Amazing. Chimera?
Yeah, I was just going to say that not one person has the same, not two people have the same career paths. So don't compare yourself to anybody. I think this panel is a testament essentially of different career paths in space that you can take and make your own narrative. And so I would just say, find your passion and just go for it. Like find something that will make you want to wake up every day and want to go do it, So yeah, I think that's just my short advice.
Love it. MG?
Yeah, perfectly said by Zed and Shamira. I'd just add that the more specific you can get, like if you can see yourself, like I said, in certain roles or go after that, like I think that's really helpful to get practical in particular, but then be flexible, right? So set your goals on the stars and then see where that path leads you and go for every opportunity that comes up.
Amazing. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and thanks so much to our panelists for taking the time to share their career paths. If you have any further questions, I encourage you to just direct them to @SEDS-Canada on Twitter,